Have you ever looked at your family and asked yourself, why was I born here with these particular people? Not all of them are gentle. Not every memory is beautiful. There are silences, wounds you don't dare to revisit. There are things you thought you had forgiven, but in truth, you've only tucked them away in an invisible drawer of memory. But what if I told you this? You chose them, not with your mind, but with your soul. Edgar Cayce once said, "No soul is ever lost, and no family is ever a coincidence." Today, we'll journey back to the origin of it all, a place where you were not yet born, but had already chosen every path you would walk. No one is ever truly born by accident. Not you, not your mother, not the daughter who once left. Before you had the chance to hold her long enough, there is a place where you once were. There is no time there, no form, only a pure radiance, as gentle as the first autumn breeze brushing through hair, damp with morning dew. In that place, you are no longer a mother, a wife, or a woman tired of searching for meaning in the passing days. You are a soul, whole, complete, and preparing for a new journey. Before you descended, there was a moment of stillness, not to think, but to listen to yourself, to what remains unsettled from lifetimes past, to promises once made, still waiting to be fulfilled, to lessons half learned, then abandoned, to words of love left unspoken, to dreams once shattered, but never fully forgiven. No one forced you to return to earth. You agreed. You chose, once again, not because you forgot the pain, but because you understood no light ever truly shines unless it has passed through the dark. And so, a blueprint was created, not a sentence, not a punishment, just a gentle reminder. Your mother would be the one to open the doorway for your descent. Your father would be the one to show the direction. Your brother, your sister, your first husband, all of them stood around you once, perhaps as friends, perhaps as foes, perhaps as the child you once lost in a faraway lifetime. This time, they would return in a different role, and so would you. You didn't choose your family because they were perfect. You chose them because they were your lessons. You didn't choose the easiest place. You chose the place where your soul could grow the deepest. And just like that, you descended through a stream of light, through a fading memory, through your first cry. No one remembers, but that doesn't mean nothing was arranged. You carry that blueprint within your chest, like a silent melody, a gentle calling, hidden beneath what seems random. You once chose everything you're living now, not with the mind, but with love, a love larger than memory, longer than time. And if today you find yourself reading these words, perhaps you are beginning to remember not the past, but the reason your soul came back to that very family. Not every soul can incarnate just anywhere. Just like a note only resonates in the right key, like a seed only sprouts in soil that has waited through the right seasons. Reincarnation is not a free fall. It is a resonance. A soul carries its own frequency like a fingerprint, like a heartbeat. And it is that very frequency that calls forth all that is aligned with it. Family, circumstance, pain, love, silence. All of it reflects something the soul has carried and is still carrying. You were not born into chaos because the world is unjust, but because there is still a part within you that remains unarranged, unloved, unseen. And that very place becomes the perfect mirror. There have been souls who were about to be born, but at the very last moment, something changed. The frequency shifted, and the blueprint changed with it. A child is born into a family and says, "She's not my real mother," not because something went wrong, but because something was exchanged at the vibrational level, and that soul still entered not as a punishment, but as a new opportunity, an unexpected turn in the journey of light. For older souls, such changes are not frightening. They are the natural part of a higher choice. The soul is never trapped. It only agrees to enter an experience when it feels the time has come. If you were born into a family where affection was scarce, perhaps you were the one who once locked your own heart in lifetimes past. If you were born into gentleness, perhaps that is something you once sowed, now returned to you as a gift. Nothing is random. No one is out of place. You are exactly where your soul could reach what it needed most. Not what is easiest, not what was expected, but what is deepest. And that is why you were born here, in this family, at that exact time, not as a glitch of fate, but as a perfect chord in the symphony of the universe. You are not lost. You are simply beginning to remember that the place you were sent to is the very place your soul once called forth with its own hands. There are people we meet for the first time, yet our heart falls silent, as if it has just found something long lost. A glance, a soft touch on the hand, a voice that makes your entire being pause in an invisible moment, and somehow you feel the urge to cry. It's not an emotion of the present. It's a memory of the soul quietly awakening. We don't just return to our family. We return to familiar souls, souls who have lived, died, loved, betrayed, fallen, and promised beside us, souls whose stories with us are not yet complete, relationships left unfinished, cycles still waiting to be unraveled. Not everyone who appears in our life is new. Most are continuations, the next chapter of a story once left unfinished. The controlling father in this life may have been the child we once abandoned in a past one. The cold mother may have been a lover who once waited for us in vain. The defiant child may have been a soul teacher, now returned to test the depth of our unconditional love. We switch roles. We rotate between the one who causes pain and the one who suffers it, not for punishment, but for understanding. That's how karma works, not through retribution, but through awakening. Every difficult relationship in the family is a mirror, a karmic mirror that reflects what we once refused to face, that shows us parts of ourselves still hidden behind pain, resentment, or fear. There was once a woman who lived through 3 marriages, who ached from a father who never said, "I love you," who never felt like she was enough. In a deep meditation, she saw an image. That very father was once the infant she abandoned in another lifetime, when she herself was too young to care for a soul. The soul does not blame. It simply returns carrying a silent lesson. This time, he became the one unable to give love, so that she could feel what it means to be left without explanation, not to suffer, but to open compassion. This karmic mirror doesn't reveal itself right away. It hides behind behaviors that easily anger or wound us. But if we dare to stay still, not reacting impulsively, not blaming, the mirror will begin to shine, and something inside the heart will break open, not from pain, but because finally we understand that the other didn't come to destroy us. They came to help us remember ourselves. When we dare to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because we need to be free, karma dissolves. When we stop demanding others to love us the way we expect, an old layer of energy is released. When we look at a family member and wonder, maybe I once did the same to them in another lifetime, the heart of compassion opens, and the cycle ends. The soul does not fear pain. It only fears repeating without understanding and having to return one more time. Every conflict in a family is an opportunity, not for someone to win, but for 2 souls to become free together. Maybe you're living with someone you simply cannot understand. Maybe your mother-daughter relationship is filled with tension, disappointment, or distance, try to look again, not as someone who is suffering, but with the heart of a soul who once promised to return to close an ancient cycle. When you change the way you see, the karmic mirror no longer reflects wounds. It becomes a doorway that leads you through into another depth where all that once hurt begins to be understood, begins to be forgiven, and begins to be healed. There are children who make us feel small. They are unlike anyone else. They don't need to be taught how to feel. They don't need many words to understand the sorrow of grown-ups. They have eyes that seem to know everything. They ask questions that leave us without answers. And sometimes their gaze makes us feel ashamed of ourselves. They didn't come to learn. They came to teach us things we once knew, but lost along the way. Edgar Cayce once said, "We don't just reincarnate into a family, but into a soul group. Within that group, roles are not fixed. We switch places, rotating between parent, child, lover, teacher, and sometimes even the betrayer. The one who was your father in a past life is now the child you're trying to understand. The one who was once your student is now the older sister you've always felt inferior to. The one who was a deep, passionate love is now your half-sibling, or the childhood friend you could never bring yourself to leave. We find each other in every form, because the soul never forgets. It only hides for a while. A mother once shared that after giving birth to her first daughter, she often felt a strange sensation, as if she were the one being cared for. Though only 3 years old, the little girl always knew when her mother needed a hug. She knew when to stay silent and when to say, "Don't be sad. Mommy, I'm right here." No one had taught her that. She carried it from a place before she came here. That is the reversal of soul roles. When the teacher reincarnates as the student, when the one who once lifted you up in another lifetime now rests in your arms, waiting for you to grow through a love you once didn't know how to give. And sometimes those role reversals are soul tests. Someone who once bound you in power is now the rebellious child, teaching you how to surrender control. Someone you once fled from is now the one you must protect, helping you learn that love isn't about escape, but presence. Roles are garments. The soul is water. It flows through all forms, but its essence stays the same. When we see our child not just as a child, but as a soul who once walked beside us, who once taught us, we open a new door. It's no longer parent teaches child, but two souls learning from each other. No more expectations, demands, or corrections, only listening. We don't always have to be perfect parents. We just have to be real ones, honest enough to admit, sometimes the greatest lessons don't come from books, but from the small eyes watching us every day. If there's a child in your life who stirs up in you a whirlwind of love, fear, helplessness, and gratitude, perhaps you once loved them in another form. Perhaps you once owed them care or trust, and this time, you've been given the chance to live it not through theory, but through the heart. When you touch that truth, something inside begins to melt. It's no longer my child. It becomes a soul walking with me, teaching me about me. And that is why we switch roles through lifetime after lifetime, not to repeat the play, but to resolve, to evolve, to remember that every soul we've ever met is part of something ancient, something real, something sacred. There are two people who existed before you even had a name. One opened the door for you to enter this world. The other carved out your path in silence, whether they stayed or not, whether they loved you the way you needed or not. They remain the first two landmarks on your soul's map. The mother is not just a biological vessel. She is the bridge between the soul world and the earthly realm. When you entered the fetal body, you passed through her like a stream of slow, radiant light. You borrowed her heartbeat, her breath, and even the unspoken fears buried deep within her. And if she had been hurt, you felt it. If she had ever been exhausted, on the edge of letting go, still, you came through. Because the soul doesn't choose a perfect mother. It chooses the one who can create the most aligned beginning for its lessons. For some, the relationship with the mother is a gentle, nurturing source of love. For many others, it is the first wound, deep, cold, and without a name. But whatever it may be, it is always the starting point of the healing journey. The mother is the lesson of receiving, of trust, of learning to allow oneself to be loved, or learning to love oneself when no one else does. Wherever the wound with the mother lies, there too lies the soul's greatest hidden lesson, not to suffer, but to awaken, so that one day, in a dream, or in a quiet afternoon alone, you might whisper in your heart, "Now I understand," and let go. Not because your mother changed, but because you've seen her with the eyes of a soul. The Father is not always gentle, but He is the direction, the pace, the boundary, and also the sky. When He is present, He gives you the feeling, "I am going somewhere." When He is absent, the emptiness teaches you how to find your own way from within. A father does not need many words. He teaches through distance, through discipline, through the silent gaze when you've done something wrong, or through the moments He simply didn't show up. For some, the Father is a symbol of strength. For many, He is someone they never fully understood. A wall, a shadowed back, something that always made them feel they were not enough. But the Father is also a lesson about self-worth, about boundaries, about choosing the right path, even when no one is there to guide you. If the mother is the boat that carries the soul to earth, the Father is the compass. And if the compass doesn't always point true north, then the journey becomes one of self-discovery. You once arrived through your mother. You once learned to walk through your father. No matter who they were, you are still living, still loving, still remembering. No one holds you in the past but yourself. No one stops you from letting go, but the fear of having nothing left to hold. But when you dare to let go, you step into something truly beautiful, freedom from within. You are no longer the child aching to be seen. You become the woman, mature enough to look back at your parents, not with expectation, but with gratitude. Thank you for leading me here, whether through tenderness or through scars. You didn't just choose your parents. You also chose the land. You chose the first breath of air you would inhale. You chose the first voice you would hear. You chose the culture that would wrap around your early years like a second skin. No one is ever born in the wrong place. No soul ever lands at the wrong coordinates. The time and space of your birth are the canvas on which you will paint this lifetime's masterpiece. You arrived at the exact moment when your lessons needed to come alive the most, not earlier, not later, not elsewhere. Some souls choose to be born into war, not to suffer, but to learn the value of life. Some choose harsh, impoverished, limited lands, not because they deserve it, but because their souls came to learn compassion, unconditional giving, and how to hold light when no one else is lighting the flame. There are souls who choose to be born into fast-paced, modern, over-comforted societies, yet lacking in true connection. They come to awaken something, an ancient awareness long forgotten, a memory of simplicity, a reminder of love that lives beyond screens and habits. Every birthplace holds a frequency, and your soul, before incarnating, felt that frequency like a wordless calling. You chose it, just as an artist chooses the right canvas for the painting that must be born, because you knew that place would raise the deepest questions, and by living your truth, you would write the answers. Someone once asked, "Why was I born in a society that doesn't believe in the soul? Why did I grow up among people who never said, I love you. Perhaps because you are the one who carries the memory of those things. And this time, you did not come to be understood, but to keep something alive, to be a bridge between worlds that once lost each other. A woman once said, I've always felt I was born in the wrong era. I dream of memories that don't belong to the history I was taught. I write in a language I've never learned, and I cry when I see a painting of a distant land as if I've lived there long ago. And then she understood. She wasn't born in the wrong place. Her soul simply carried fragments from many lands, and where she lives now is the meeting point where all of it must come together to become real. You don't need to fully understand. Just be still enough to feel there's something in the wind, in the light, in the scent of the first summer rain that makes you remember something very distant but very real. You are living in a space that was chosen by you to learn, to teach, to awaken, or simply to do something no one else has ever done. Maybe it's to love. Maybe it's to let go. Maybe it's to return to something without a name. And if at times you feel like you don't belong, don't rush to leave. Stay a little longer, because perhaps you are the reason this place has a chance to change. There are souls who do not come to repeat. They come to bring closure, to fold up a chapter in the family story that has gone on too long in silence, fear, and inner turmoil. They are not like anyone else in the family. They ask questions no one dares to answer. They sense things that were never spoken. They cry over sadness that isn't theirs alone. They feel the heaviness, even when nothing seems wrong. From a young age, they know they are different, not because they are better, but because they carry a deep, quiet loneliness, as if they're standing in the middle of an old current, and they are the only ones swimming against it. They are the ones with the mission of transformation, not heroes, not the loudest voices, just the first ones in the family to say, this stops with me. They refuse to pass on the silence between mothers and daughters. They refuse to pass on the unnamed rage from fathers to sons. They refuse to pass on the belief that love must cost, must sacrifice, must erase the self. They enter the family like an unfamiliar wind. At first, they may be resisted, misunderstood, labeled as too sensitive, too different, too unrealistic. But that very difference is the sign their souls have lived many lives. They've seen enough cycles repeat, and this time, they've come to write a different ending, not by fighting, but by awakening. When the young mother sits down to write a letter to her own mother and then tears it up, not from rage, but because she's forgiven in her heart, a cycle ends. When the son embraces his father for the first time without needing an apology, a layer of ice melts when the middle-aged woman says to her child, for the very first time, I love you, even if I don't know how to love perfectly. A generation is saved. You don't have to heal everything. You just have to be the first to say, I see this. I don't blame anyone, but I will not carry it forward. People like this, Edgar Cayce called carriers of transformation, those who bring light into rooms that have been dark for far too long, not to force change on others, but to become the starting point for a new wave. Maybe you are one of them, the one who has lived through unnameable conflicts, the one who blamed yourself for never fitting in, the one who has carried a sorrow with no clear origin. And now you are reading these words not by accident, but because your soul is ready to remember. You didn't come here to fit in. You came to end something and to begin something new. No one may see it. No one may know. But in the quiet choices you make, the tears you wipe when no one's looking, the boundaries you set without shouting, you are doing soul work. You are changing the course of a bloodline. And that quiet, humble, but sacred beyond measure is everything. There is something the soul always knows, but the human often forgets. That Every script can be rewritten, even if it was drafted before you were born, even if the roles were pre-assigned, and the turning points carefully placed in time. You have always had one thing that can never be taken from you: the power to choose. No one can force you to live like your parents. No one can make you keep loving someone who hurts you. No invisible hand requires you to suffer endlessly to repay karma. The soul doesn't design a life to punish you. It simply creates a framework, a few key moments, a few souls you promised to meet, a few lessons you agreed to learn. But how you walk that path is up to you. You can move through pain with resistance or with understanding. You can repeat the old roles or break them with compassion. You can live in fear or transform it into freedom. And when you begin to do that, the script begins to shift. The mother who was once cold remains unchanged, but the way you see her changes, and that shift in perception sets you free. Strangely, it begins to free her too. The father, who hurt with silence, still says nothing, but you no longer need his words to feel worthy. Your child still exhausts you, but you no longer react the same way. You see, this is a soul learning, just like you. And you smile, not as a struggling mother, but as an old friend, finally recognizing them. Everything seems the same, but once you awaken, everything is different. Not because the world has changed, but because you are no longer lost in your own story. You have become the one rewriting the next chapters, not through control, but through understanding, not with resentment, but with gratitude that you came, that you learned, that you hurt, and then chose differently. You are no longer a victim in a soul-designed script. You are now a co-creator, a soul living its deepest freedom, not needing anyone's permission, not needing anyone to change first, only needing one thing: for you to begin seeing clearly. If you've walked with me all the way to this point, perhaps you, too, can feel it. We are no longer the same as when we began, not because you've gained more understanding, but because you've just touched a quiet space, one you've long been unconsciously avoiding. That silence isn't found in books. It isn't found in theory. It lives in the place where your soul has always been waiting for you to return. You don't need to remember everything you've heard. You don't need to understand it all right now. Because the things that truly touch the soul never arrive through logic. They come when you've been silent long enough to realize you are remembering something ancient, but never forgotten. Maybe tonight, as you lie down, a strange dream will come. Not loud, not clear, just a feeling, as if you're standing at an invisible threshold where there are no more human voices, only wind and light and something unnamed, but it makes you feel free. And if you feel you're no longer alone, even in a place where no one understands you, then maybe someone has quietly walked beside you your whole life. Not a person, but your own soul, whispering, "You chose all of this, and you can choose again whenever you're ready." No need to rush, no need to prove anything. Only begin with one simple thing: live as if the soul is immortal. Because when you live that way, this life has never been ordinary. This family has never been meaningless, and you have never been lost.